I wanted to go all the way back to your great-grandfather, who I believe was born in 1870, and you take his birth as the origin of the Chaudhary Group. And he was the person who moved to Kathmandu. And I wonder, growing up, was he someone that you heard about a lot in terms of who he was as a person, how he influenced your family?
Actually, the history and foundation and origin of our group started in that year itself. If it wasn't for my great grandfather, we wouldn't be here today. And the foundation of our businesses and our lineage started at that time itself, passed on from my great grandfather to my grandfather, and from my grandfather to my father, and now us. Obviously, those times were very different. My great grandfather was born in a state called Rajasthan in India. And that is the backdrop or the abode of the community where Marwadis origin. And Marwadis are supposed to be very astute entrepreneurs. And some of the most successful entrepreneurs in the world are Marwadis and have originated from Rajasthan itself. Yes, they have gone from their villages and cities in Rajasthan itself all over the world and done pretty good for themselves. So we do come from an entrepreneurial background by blood, you can say. And my great-grandfather set the founding stone and he moved to Nepal together with my grandfather. My grandfather then came here and learned the ropes, I would say, through my great-grandfather, how to become an entrepreneur, how to handle the businesses. I remember that my great-grandfather used to take my grandfather everywhere. And he started off with his business. And it all started when he came to Nepal and started selling textile. And he was selling textile to the royal family at that point in time. He used to be on a courtyard, because he could not look up at the ladies and the women in those days when they're looking down from the window. And he used to lay down the cloth and the textiles on top of that for them to see. And then they would choose, and my grandfather would then take that textile upstairs to them, So obviously, it started off in a very humble way, no doubt. I guess the most important factor of any family business is the continuity of heritage, culture, tradition, and values. And all of these culminate what we call a foundation. And that is the most important for any family business to survive and to see the light at the end of the tunnel with future generations coming on.
It was so long ago when your great-grandfather moved over. You still talk about these values. Clearly, you're still very connected to that heritage. I wonder what it was growing up that allowed you to feel so connected to everything that your family is and how it originated from when you were born in Nepal and you grew up here. So it would be natural to assume you have no connections left with India.
Actually, that's not true. I'll tell you why. Because I had the fortune of obviously spending a lot of time with my grandparents. Obviously, all of this was passed on to my grandparents, right? So they did a lot to pass it on to us and through my parents as well. So we had that continuity when it comes to still having your feet grounded as well as being connected to your ancestors and to Rajasthan itself. And also to keep in mind that I went to a boarding school to India. I was there from class 1 to 12. So I was there for most part of my young years itself. And a lot of time used to be spent in Rajasthan as well. So we were always, my parents would always make sure that we were still connected with our roots and are aware of where we came from. That's most important for a proper continuity for times to come, And I don't think our parents ever or my grandparents ever forgot that because they felt it is most important to us as well. And that's how we grew. So we've always been in touch with our value system, our culture, tradition, morals, as well as our entrepreneurial foundation as well. And that's what has come to use till now in our lives.
What were the most important values growing up that your grandparents, your parents taught you and your brothers?
I think the most important would be that never forget where you came from, because our family has come from very, very humble beginning. And my father, in one of his interviews, had mentioned that I'm a humble man from a humble country with big dreams. And I think that pretty much sums up the biggest learning that we have had from our last two generations itself. That's number one. Number two would also be in terms of the respect and the appreciation that you offer for your past generations. Because you wouldn't be where you are today if it weren't for them. And you have to always appreciate that and value. That is very important. Third would be, I would say, the process of learning and the knowledge that is imparted on you, which is expected to be imparted on the future generations as well. So when it's a family business, it is a business that has been there for the past 150 years, but will go on for many more 100 years, thousand of years for times to come. I think these are three most important aspects that our family has taught us. Obviously, and I mean, needless to mention about the way in doing business, the way that one should be in terms of valuing money and the way that one should value labor. And when I say value labor, meaning dignity of labor. And also from the perspective of how one should look at business while giving back to the society as well. Because the society has given you so much appreciation, the society has given you so much love, and you are where you are because of what they feel about what all you have done. And we must always take that into consideration as a core value of our group, which is one of the most important pillars of CG as well.
You talked about love and giving back to society, and it makes me think of, and this is something I read in your father's book, that as Marwadi, you're the oldest trading community, but being in Nepal as Marwadi, I wonder what that means and how it's impacted you, because it doesn't sound as though people are necessarily open, and they might even go so far as to consider you foreign, even though you were born there. Is that correct?
Yes, Ling, I mean, the reality is what you said, actually, that people do. I mean, we are not hardcore Nepalis from the perspective of having Nepalese origin. I mean, that goes without saying. Obviously, we have an Indian origin. But having said that, we also came to this country over 100 years back. Everything about us is Nepali. We all have Nepalese passports. We have grown up in this country and we associate ourselves with Nepal itself. The local Nepalese may have a different, I won't say everyone, I would not like to generalize, but you're always going to have some bad apples, as one would like to call it. But that's okay. I mean, the way I look at life is that there are going to be some people who don't say good things about you. Is the time when you know you're doing something right. But anyway, leaving that aside, yes, for us to come to Nepal, we do have an Indian origin, no doubt. And that brings with it a lot of advantages. And being a Nepali, having Indian origin also brings with it disadvantages. But we have managed to maneuver those because we don't get wrapped up around our origin and where we came from and the color of our skin and so on and so forth. We believe ourselves by heart, mind, and soul that we are Nepali and we are here for the people, with the people, and we are continuing to do that from that perspective itself. And there comes a point in life, Ling, where you start ignoring the less important things that don't matter. And you start focusing on things that matter. Because those that will appreciate what you have done and appreciate what you continue to do are the ones that you should take along with your journey towards your larger vision.
And I wonder, that kind of awareness of just focusing on the good and moving forward, was that something that you always had as a child? What were you like growing up? I read in your father's book as well that he said you used to suffer from asthma attacks as well, and you had to rush to the hospital at night.
Again, this is something that was taught by my father, my parents rather, as well, that not everyone is perfect. Everyone comes with certain natural problems, or, I mean, you are born with it. It's just up to you how you look at it, whether it's a glass is half empty or glass is half full, you know. Yes, I did have a challenge, no doubt, when I was very young because of asthma, because in those days, obviously, medication and healthcare was not to the extent as what it is right now. So yes, I had to go to the hospital quite often, and my mother used to spend pretty much most of the nights she was with me and taking care of me. But I could have looked at that as a negative in my life, but I didn't do that because I was told and taught in my life that you should always learn to fight your fears. You should always learn to make your disadvantage an advantage. And you'll see with all sense of modesty and humility, you know, when I went to school, I mean, I was in the national team of 3 sports. I mean, there's this award that is given in high school called the Gentleman Sportsman of the Year, where only one person gets it before you leave school. And I was that person. And one would not even imagine There's a record that I have in school of having scored the highest number of goals in the history of school in soccer. I scored 46 in 23 games. Things like this. I could have simply sat down and said that I've got asthma, I can't do this. But I fought it out, and I believe I managed to live through it and emerge stronger. But that is something that taught me a lot in life as well. And the foundation of what was imparted to me by my parents was something that I used in school, and I harnessed that. And I continue to do that in other aspects in life as well. So sports always teaches you a lot about how you are going to handle yourself in your life now and in the future, whether it's called teamwork, whether it's team spirit, whether it's your own training, it's your own preparedness, it's your dedication, it's your hard work. All of these are fundamentals of sports and fundamentals of life. But I was not an excellent student either. So I did capitalize when I was a sportsman, and I made the most of it. So I looked at it very differently in terms of me having asthma, and I made it my strength,
And to put it in context, your father said that they actually hesitated to send you because they were worried about your physical condition, and then you emerged the sporting champion.
I will tell you, Ling, it was not easy for my parents as well. I mean, I can just well imagine how difficult it was for my parents. I was just 6. And you can imagine for them to send me to a foreign country in India in a boarding school at the age of 6. And my mother, she's a very strong woman, but very emotional when it comes to her children. I mean, my mother used to cry even when I went to college. Okay, so of course it is very difficult for them. But I think they felt that if it would be difficult for them now, they had that confidence and that faith and hope that what they are hoping for and expecting after the education is what they are looking at, the bigger picture. And I think that's what they did. So they just let a bird free, and he let the bird fly. That's what they call it.
I mean, you were only 6, and they're saying it's to Welham, then Doen school, and your father had to go through so much effort just to get your elder brother and yourself into the school. Why was it so important for them that you need to go to that school at such a young age?
Nepal did not in those days, by the way, have good schools. My father, unfortunately, had to step into business when he was 18 years old because my grandfather had a cardiac arrest. So obviously my grandfather, he survived, but he had to obviously not get into the core businesses, day-to-day businesses. So my father did not have the opportunity to go to school like we did. I mean, in class 6, in class 10 itself, he had to step back. So he had no education of class 11 and 12 or thereafter. So he wanted his children obviously to have a better platform and a better education. And Dehradun is supposed to be like the capital of schools in India. And he had by then, made a lot of friends. He went to any extent to make sure that we were sent to the best boarding school in India at that point in time, which continues to be. So obviously it was very important for him to give his children a platform which he could never, unfortunately, get. And that's what he did.
And so after Doen school, was it clear what you were going to do? Were you going to go straight to university or come back help the family?
Actually, funny thing is, Ling, that even when you are in Doen school or you are in a boarding school or in college, I would say more so in boarding school, we used to get holidays twice a year for 2 months each in the summer and winter. Yes, our parents used to take us for a holiday during the summer and winters for a week, 2 weeks, but we used to have 2 months holiday. While many of the children would be staying home and playing their toys, my father would ensure that we are spending time 1 or 2 hours in the office, sitting in the side of the conference room or doing something with some of his office people, just so that our process of learning starts at a very, very early stage. After we all finished our high school, yes, I mean, we obviously got the basic fundamental training during the holidays when we were coming back home. But yes, we were expected to go to college. We did that. We all went to respective colleges all across the world. But after we finished our bachelor's degree, we were very clear that we wanted to make sure we work full time in our company itself to learn before we go and do our master's. And I'll tell you, I've never done my master's education till today, because I felt that Chaudhary School of Business Administration has been my master's education. So that has really, really helped. And I would also say that even during college, I used to work. Funny story, I'll tell you that my father bought me the best car in university. But you know what he said? That I'm not paying for your insurance, nor am I paying for your gas, the petrol. You have to earn that yourself. So what I used to do was I used to work in the kitchen, washing dishes and wiping tables and wiping floors. I mean, that goes on to teach you about dignity of labor. And I did that. And I learned from that. And even for first 2 years of my school, in university, I did that. After that, I used to structure my classes in such a way that 3 days in a week, I used to have classes packed. And then after that, the 4 days in a week, I used to travel to look for business opportunities to grow in America. So that's what I did in university. And the first deal I ever closed was actually the year after I graduated from university in 2006. We closed the deal in America. So it was all a process of learning right from the beginning.
So just before we go to that first deal, I was looking at the timeline. You were studying at Miami University around the same time where back in Nepal, there was this civil war between the Maoist insurgents and the army, which really impacted your family. I wonder if you were very aware of what was going on and how it impacted your family.
No, we were obviously aware, but Asian family being Asian parents, they obviously like to shield their children from any adversity or any negativity to the extent possible. So while we knew what was happening, and obviously it is no hidden truth that during an insurgency, the ones who are targeted are usually the influential families. And that's what had happened. I mean, fortunately, God is kind that He protected us, and it wasn't anything got to do with the threat to anyone's lives. I mean, the country was in threat altogether. So we obviously were a part of that whole movement in the sense, part of the process of the insurgency. We were affected in many ways from business and our general day-to-day lives as well. But we managed to maneuver it. And like I said, all of us were not there. We were in our colleges. I think my elder brother Nirvana was studying in Nepal at that point in time, but Varun and I were not in Nepal. So we were more focused outside, and my parents also did everything possible to make sure that everything that happens outside continues to grow. And with 2 children already outside, his focus was to do that through them. That's how he had planned his future legacy, as I would call it.
So you said you were going around searching for years for deals. How were you making connections in a country that you had not grown up in?
Actually, through my father. My father used to connect me to people that he knows in America itself. And my current partner, we still have a hotel in JFK. My current partner, they're also a very influential family from Sri Lanka. And his son, my father's friend's son, has lived in New York or in America now for the past 25, 30 years. So obviously he knew people there. So I was actually also learning the ropes from him.
Was this the Mohinanis?
Yes. This is indeed the Mohinani family, and they are into hotels in Sri Lanka as well as India, and wonderful Amman assets as well. And with him, I learned the ropes of doing business in America, and that's what it was.
I read in an interview you said that you did your first deal in New York and everything went wrong with it. What was it?
Wow, you've done so much of research. I'm amazed. Very impressively. No, yes, you are right. That first deal was a very important learning for me because I remember I was in a single room at the Hilton on Avenues of America where I spent almost 2 months and we transacted a deal of almost $60 million. So you can imagine that a student who's just coming out of college is working from this small tiny room and transacting and talking to such big people in the industry, not having known what he's in for. So I mean, everything I did, I must tell you, Ling, went wrong. Whether it's negotiation with the operator, with the seller, with the bank, everything. I mean, I can literally write a book and it took us 1 year to close that deal. But having said that, I think that was the biggest learning in my life. My father says that was the most expensive learning for me and him, but I can say that learning really shaped my thinking in terms of looking at deals, evaluating deals, as well as concluding deals. I mean, those were the time when I did a deal within 12 months. Now I can look at the same deal and close it within 1 to 2 months itself. So it's all a process of learning. We still have the asset there. We are constantly evolving and looking at ways to improve the earnings and monetize our investments. But yeah, it was a brilliant learning. And funny thing, another funny story I'll tell you. The reason why we invested in America is because I told my father, I want to live in America. Now, can you imagine an Asian family, one of the children of the three saying, oh, I want to move away and go to America? That's a big blow to an Asian business family. So my father thought that he must have a business in America so that it's worth it for one of his children to go there. And that's how the first hotel came about. Now you can see destiny has it that I spent less time there and more time here now. And I love spending time in this part of the world now.
You said that you had many learnings from how to, evaluate deals, close deals. I wonder at a high level, what were those main learnings? What are the things that you look for that allow you to determine this is a deal I want to proceed with very quickly?
The most important, I would say, while looking at any deal is your entry value. And when you are talking about a hotel and real estate, that is pretty much the most important aspect. And if you're looking at a greenfield that is building right from ground up, you have to look at keeping your cost basis to the bare minimum. Same thing with regards to an operating hotel. You have to be able to buy that hotel at the bare minimum price. I mean, think of it this way, that there is a reason why two people can never be happy in a buy and sell. Because the one who's selling will always want a higher price and the one who's buying will always want a lower price. Now, being able to come to a meeting ground requires a lot of homework. It requires a lot of diligence to be able to give that rationale why you believe the value of that property is what it is. I mean, what we have done all our lives is we've always bought into companies and assets by way of its earning. The way we look at it, that you can build, let's say, Taj Mahal in New York, but if it doesn't make you money, then what use is that real estate right there, right? So you can build whatever you want. If you're not able to make the required returns, it doesn't matter what exactly you are building whatsoever. So you have to be able to customize your thinking with that aspect fundamentally. Second would be from the perspective of your strategic fit. There are a lot of deals that we did just purely based on emotions, by the way. We like the asset, we like the country, and we want to go and buy that asset. But we did not, at that point in time, I would say almost a decade back, we were not fully clear. Yes, we want to be here, we want to be there. We were very opportunistic, like any businessman. And wherever we would find a good deal, we would start evaluating that. So I believe that it's also very important to look at how important is it from your long-term perspective or your short-term. Now, we as investors are a long-term investor. We don't believe in just flipping assets. But in hindsight, we should have done that. So you see, it's a process of learning and strategizing whether you are putting in money for the short or the long term itself. And also, strategy plays a very, very important role on where you see your group going over a period of time. These two, rather, most important fundamentals are okay. You'll also be able to survive the downturn. I mean, I'll give you an example. We bought all these assets, even during the subprime of 2009, and during the earthquake here, and during all the turmoil that the world has faced in different parts of the world for the past 15 years. We've still survived. We've not had to sell even one property until a year or so back, but we've survived because we managed to keep our fundamentals of the business at a realistic and sustainable level.
And there was one particular story that I picked up from your father's book, and he said that he had written off this deal with Concept Hospitality, but then you were actually pushing Homi for 2 years, and there was a breakthrough. I wonder what it was that drove you to really push for it for so long and how that breakthrough came about.
I think I would call it an entrepreneur's gut feel. My father always used to say, it's a part of his book as well. He was asked once that, how did you make all these deals all your life and what was there to help you? And you know what he said? That my children have the luxury of the internet, have the luxury of the digitization, have the luxury of technology, have the luxury of intellect of other people who are far better prepared and far better in place to be able to advise you. He said, I had none of those, which is correct. All I had was my entrepreneurial mindset and a gut feel. And I think I also managed to pick up or learn from that in a very important way. This deal, came to us, Concept Hospitality, This is one of our most important investments, I must say. But before the deal came to us, the deal just simply went through. But somehow, while looking at the fundamentals of the deal and who Concept was talking to close the deal, I read a little bit about that company as well, by the way. But I was quite clear in my mind that after having done my research, that I don't think the deal is going to go through, because maybe the history of that company who was in negotiation with them, because they had not closed such deals in the past, and these guys were also, while they were in contract, but I also believe that they were looking at keeping the door open. I gauged that. So I kept at it. I was keeping with one of the most leading investment bankers, or let's say a consultant. His name is Homi. He was in India, and I mean, he's no more. He was literally my guru when it comes to evaluating hotel deals and getting hotel deals in India. And his son continues to be leading the business in the right fashion and where his father had taken it. But anyway, he brought the deal to me, and I would keep in touch with him. Every 2 months, I would say, how are things? How is the deal going? He would say, no, it's not come onto the table. Those guys are looking at transacting. And one fine day, destiny has it. He said, what, are you still interested? I said, absolutely, I'm interested. And then immediately I met with the founder of that company in India. And within a period of 3 to 4 months, the deal was transacted. And today we are the second largest management company in India.